Welcome, mortals, to the legendary Ghost Library of DSA. My name is Miss Cronwell, and I'll be your librarian and guide today. During this time of year, the worlds of the living and the dead come very close together. Today, you'll be able to interact with many different legendary writers who have sadly passed on, including Bram Stoker, author of Dracula, Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein, Edgar Allan Poe, and many more amazing artists and writers. During these interactions, you'll be able to ask a series of questions, but please keep them respectful and do not remind them that they are dead. So much so if you have that burning sensation to stop and recuperate yourself so I do not have to. We wouldn't want anybody traveling back to the afterlife with them, now would we? When you enter the library, try not to be alarmed. We keep the library dim and hazy so the ghosts feel more comfortable. When you've done visiting one ghost, we encourage you to go speak to another and hear their stories. They're only here for one night after all, so make the most of the time of the time they have left here. When your visit to the library is complete, please exit through the back portal to the mortal realm as you know it. I must warn you though, those who enter the library develop such deep connections with the ghosts that they want to capture them on those square screens you all call phones. Do not be that person, for the ghosts have been captured on the DSA YouTube channel for you all to enjoy later. Have you all signed the liability waivers? Interesting. Because we're not responsible for any death, injuries, or you all should be fine. Shall we enter?
Wagwan! Everything Irie? Oh, the eye just lost his mind. Forgot the eye in a foreign land. Let's I do that again. Hello, everything alright? I was just in the middle of writing this song. But now that you stopped by, let's I introduce myself. I am Robert Nesta Marley, better known as Bob Marley, Skip, or Tough Gang. But you can call me Bob. The I hail from the lovely island of Jamaica. You should visit one day when you get the chance. Growing up, the I was a struggling youth. I never had it all. I never had anything but music. You see, the I came from a very musical family, so naturally, it was I's escape from all that was going on around I. Actually, my maternal grandfather Omari I teach me about the arts of music. I was only 10 when I had my first performance at primary school, and was just 18 when I started his musical career, starting a musical group with my childhood friend Bunny Wheeler and later friend Peter Tosh. We had a lot of names for the band, like the Wailing Wheelers, the Wailing Rude Boys, the Teenagers. But in the end, we did just stuck with the Wheelers. Cause in life, we all started out crying. And when we first started, we were crying out. Crying out for those especially who were oppressed. So I remember the joy after our first hit song, Simmer Down. To this day, I still see people rock and go on to that song. And to think, it was almost rejected by the producer Coxon at first. But by the hand of the Almighty, the one and only Jah, a year later, the song was rocking the whole island from the girl to Moran Pines. But you know what them always say, man? The stone that the builder refused will always become the head cornerstone. And just like that, it was at studio when recording some songs that I met my wife Rita. She was recording some songs with our band The Solettes too. And if love wasn't already interesting enough, the Wailers and I started to sing backing vocals on the Solettes single, That Ain't Right. After meeting her, I started writing notes to her through my brethren, telling her how much I liked her and wanted to talk to her. As a young youth, I never knew what I was doing. But she came around, and we found love through music and I coaching our vocals. We got married 3 years later, 1966, toured the world together with the Wailers, with the roles reversing and Rita becoming one of our backing singers. We had 3 children together. Sidela, named after I's mother, my first boy Ziggy, and my next boy Stefan. I also adopted our 2 daughters too, Sharon from a previous relationship Rita had, and Stephanie from an affair Rita had with a football player, or as you people would say, soccer. See, it's funny how when I had other kids with other women, the whole world had things to say. But Rita had other kids too. The I had 5 other sons. Rohan, Robert, Julian, Kimani, and Damien. And another daughter, Karen. The I loved and looked after all my children, even the ones who never came from my blood. You see, my father left I when I was just a little pickiny, and he died when I was just 10. I never know him. Him never exists to me. The only time I've seen that man was a picture my mother showed me of him on a horse. And even then, he looked like a stranger. I look at the picture and say, I know my father, that man. The man was white. And at that age, I never knew that a white man could be able to create a black man. I never want any of my children to look at a picture of I and don't know who I be. Now, back to Rita. Rita introduced me to the religion Rastafari. You might not know what that religion is, but it's a religion where we worship Jah, and Jah is the incarnation of Jesus. You see, the I is a Rasta, and to be a Rasta is a mindset, you know. You're your own man. That's the first time you ever get to own yourself. Anything anybody says to you, you don't care. Reggae music was a huge part of Rastafari culture. Music was a way to talk on social and political issues. The lyric and the genre style was like a non-violent protest against social injustice, white oppression, and the dominant race-class system. Rastafari taught me that love is the only thing that can heal this world. And when I say love, you know, I don't mean the love you see on TV and in movies. Not no scripted love, not no written love, but real love. Love that is strong, love that forgives, the patient kind of love. You see, in this society, them teach with hate to drag each other down to reach the top. And that's not the way, man. The only way this can change is through love, respect, unity. One love, that's the way it should be. You see, the way how I write my songs is to give hope to all, especially during the times where Jamaica was on a civil war. Gangs against gangs, police against Rastas, humans against humans. It was a very long and hard time. And because of the message that I put through reggae music, a lot of people never liked I. So, one day when the Wailers and I were rehearsing for the Smile Jamaica concert that we'd hope would calm all the tension in the country, 7 gunmen came into my home and attempted to assassinate I. Them shoot my Yasso and Yasso. Them shoot my then manager too, Dan Taylor, and a bandmate, Louis Griffiths. And if that wasn't even enough for them shoot my wife Rita too, right in her head. It was by one dreadlock that saved her life. But them did think this would have stopped I. 2 days later, at the Smile Jamaica concert, I went on stage, still recovering from my injuries, and performed in front of 80,000 people. Rita was there too, right in a hospital gown. Them couldn't stop we. Them couldn't stop the love, the peace. Them couldn't stop the message. Oh, wait, the I have been talking for so long. You have any questions for I?
Oh, hello. Sorry I didn't see you there. I do tend to get a bit distracted in a good story. My name is Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller. You may know me as Agatha Christie, writer of many mysteries. Not long after I changed my name, but enough of that for the moment. I was born September 15th, 1890 in a small part of England called Devon, where I spent most of my childhood. I lived with my sister Margaret, along with my mother and father. My childhood was like any other. I was homeschooled by my mother and private tutors. My mother didn't believe in formal education before I was 8 years old. I taught myself how to read at the age of 4 against my mother's will. Besides reading and writing, I spent most of my time enjoying maths and music. I learned how to play the piano and the melodone. I didn't quite like the idea of performing, so I enjoyed it as a hobby. When I was 11 years old, my father passed away. It was 1901. Me and my mother became inseparable, but we had no money. She sent me to Miss Gaia's girls' boarding school. When I was a young girl, I was often sick, so my mother would encourage me to write short stories to keep myself entertained. I wrote and drew about the military, doctors, and relatives of friends. That is, until Margaret, my sister, challenged me. She said that I wouldn't be able to write a detective novel, and of course I proved her wrong. In 1912, I met my husband at Lady Clifford's grand home. If I do say so myself, I was a bit nervous. I felt like I'd seen the man of my dreams. Something didn't feel quite right. A few years later, we married, and my daughter Rosen Hicks was born in 1990. It was during this time I spent thousands and thousands of hours working as a nurse during the Great War and the Second World War. I also worked in Town Hall's Red Cross Hospital, where I became a pharmacist, learning about poisons and drugs, which came in handy later on. Oh, my apologies. Where are my manners? Would anyone like any tea? Well, I suppose I should have asked that sooner. Where was I? Oh, in 1920 I published my first novel, The Mysterious Affairs of Styles. I was rejected by many publishers before I was finally accepted by a fellow named John Lane at the Broadley Head Publishing Company. He expressed there were a few parts of my conclusion that needed to be adjusted. Of course I agreed, unaware that this was the start of my writing. I was criticized and lectured regularly about being a female writer. Obviously they didn't know real talent when they see it. My mother passed away in 1926, and I stopped writing. It didn't take much longer for my marriage to crumble. Archibald fell in love with another woman. Oh, stop that, Clarence. Stop that nonsense. Yes, I was a bit upset. Frustrated on my play. You may have heard of this next bit, but people found that quite sensational at the time. But on December 3rd, 1926, around 9:45 p.m., I kissed my daughter goodbye, and I left. Gone. Vanished. I checked myself into the Swan Hydropathic Hotel, or the Harrogate, if you will, under the name Teresa Neal from Cape Town. I managed to go without notice for 11 days before I was outed and recognized by a random stranger. As you can imagine, chaos was short. But I did start writing again, eventually. My mother would have expected me to keep calm and carry on. And I don't regret it. I have now written and published 20 original plays, 74 novels, 66 of them being detective novels, and 14 short stories. My book, The Man in the Brown Suit, is one of the top-selling novels to this very day, along with many others. You may have heard of the character Hercule Poirot. He is very popular, and I've continued to feature him in later stories. Truly, I had no ambition for writing. My mother wanted me to become a writer, and writing just came naturally. That's when I started to write plays. My play, The Mousetrap, is the longest-running theatrical show in the world. But I always like to say, every story has its own purpose, and shares a story like no other. But I can't remember what I was about to say. Oh, Clemens, you're right, of course. Did anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? I'd be delighted to give an answer.
Oh, hello. My name is Mary Godwin Shelley. And who might you be? Oh, you might know my husband, Percy Shelley, romantic writer and poet. Well, I have a secret. I'm also a writer. You may know my book, Frankenstein. You may even think it's my husband's. People always think it's my husband's because I am a young woman, so I can't write a book that can crawl in someone's mind and make them think of the dead, but it's my nightmare of an idea that makes people's skin crawl. My husband was lovely, but it is mine. Most people that come to visit want to hear about him. What about me? Today, you will get to know me. Me. William Godwin, my father, was a great writer. So even though I didn't go to school, I did learn how to read and write. At a young age, I found a love for writing. My mother's grave was my favorite place to write at a young age. The safest place. My father sent me abroad to Scotland. It was when I came back that I met Percy, the love of my life. But you've already heard his story. Years later, I went to give Percy a gift of life for loving me. But my children were never warm. They were always cold. I had to rub them by the fire. But when I awoke, there was never a baby to be found. They haunt my nightmares. They are the reason I found my Frankenstein. My Frankenstein that came back with a spark. My husband lost his spark when the water took over his body and took his ability to breathe. When he drowned. In Frankenstein, I wrote, "There's nothing more painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change." Percy changed my life. So did Frankenstein. Frankenstein was me, scared and alone, everywhere he went. Not long after, I lost Lord Byron, a friend of mine. It hurt to have my husband's heart so close to me, to where I write and not hear a beat. Now I am truly alone in this world. I have no one. I'm all alone. Don't give me that sorrowful pity look. Sorry. I get such bad headaches these days. Well, you came here to talk too, didn't you? Been talking for so long. Do you have any questions?
Whoa, finally you all are here. I mean, I waited so long, I already started my piece. Wait a minute, this is a whole new group. I'm sorry, I haven't had anything new prepared. I'd like to formally introduce myself. My name is Robert Fossey, but you can all call me Bob. A little bit about myself and my background. I was born in Chicago, 1927. Boy, I'll tell you, that was a time to dance. No, correction, it was the time to dance. My mother, Sadie Fossey, was a very well-known vaudevillian dancer at the time. Vaudeville was and still is one of my favorite styles of dance. I started there when I was only 13 years old. Growing up, I was the youngest of 6 children. They all had their own little quirks and talents, but nothing connected me and my mother like the stage, the lights, and dance. Working with a very early mentor of mine, a Mr. Cole Porter, it was my first choreographed piece, so we wanted it to be big. At the end, the only thing left on stage were my 4 dancers and some very strategically placed feathers. For a few years, I did many main stage productions off-Broadway. Then when I was 18, I enlisted in the Navy, thankfully in the entertainment wing. You didn't think I was gonna serve this country with guns, did you? No, I would dance and entertain the soldiers during chow time, keep them lively. Then, after about 2 or so years of that, I moved to New York, where I started my studies at the American Theater Wing. There is where I met my first wife, a Miss Mary Ann Niles. Oh, what a doll she was. Ironically, Mary was with me for our Broadway debut. We were both in the chorus of Dance Me a Song. Now, as for Mary and I, we didn't last very long. See, the problem is I cheated on poor Mary. It was during a movie musical project, Damn Yankees, with a Miss Gwen Verdon. I had this problem ever since I was a kid. I mean, I seen something I liked and I had to have it. Now, as for Gwen and I, we had our quarrels, we had our fights. She always said she didn't quite like my work ethic. She said I never had too much respect for my dancers' time, which is absurd. I mean, first of all, I would never call my dancers. I called all my performers actors. And she said I was too focused on my legacy. A legacy that had to be ensured, if not for me, then for my sweet baby Nikki. Nikki being my daughter, by the way. I mean, think about it. I had written, choreographed, and directed Chicago, Cabaret, and my autobiography, all that jazz, all within 3 years. I had won 4 Tonys, 3 Emmys, and was nominated for a Grammy. Just thinking about the whole ordeal gets me so flustered. Bad thing about that is, when I was about 34 years old, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. It was one of the worst pieces of news I could get as a performer. The medication, it fogged my mind. All I could think to preoccupy my time, the restless nights, the not enough sleep was love and affection, and not the kind that I was getting at home. Problem with that was, did they really love me for me, or did they love me for Fossey? Did they love me because they wanted to, or because they were afraid I could put their careers through the garbage if they refused? A problem I caused myself. Problems that I could have fixed myself. Enough about myself. Did anybody have any questions?
Oh, I did notice you there. Sometimes you get so immersed in my writing. The librarian informed me that I'll be telling you about my story. Not that it's an interesting story, but come, gather around and we'll begin. I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Edgar A. Poe. I had a rather unfortunate childhood. My parents passed away early in my life, but that was only first of many dreadful events that will occur over the next few decades. You see, misfortune seems to follow me everywhere I go. But I'll admit, I grew rather fond of it, as if it were an old friend. It's part of the reason why I find myself writing about it so often. Melancholy to me is what air is to other people. It's always there, always present, lurking in the corners of my mind, always beating its steady sound. A low, dull, quick sound, as much of a sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. An erratic heartbeat that is always sounding in my ears, reminding me that the deeds we ponder and the thoughts we embrace will drive a man to madness, but never tip his mind over the brink. The mind of a madman is a fascinating place, but I digress. When I was 13 is when I discovered my love for writing. At the time, I was separated from my siblings and I lived with John and Frances Allen on their tobacco plantation in Virginia. I never liked John. He wanted me to follow the family tobacco business. But even at a young age, I could hear the pen calling out to me. When I began my university education, John refused to help pay for my tuition, so I had to leave school. I joined the military for some time, but was eventually kicked out. That's when I decided I was going to take my career as a writer more seriously. John didn't support me at all, so I did what any sensible person would have done. I ran away to Boston. That's where I live now with my wife, Virginia. I've written many books and poets such as The Gold Bug, Telltale Heart, and The Raven. I'm actually quite fond of The Raven. It's one of my favorite pieces this fall. Let me recite a piece for you. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint of curious volume and forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. If you'd like to hear the rest, you'll have to come back another time, I'm afraid. I've only got a bit more time to speak with you all, and I like to use it well. I try my best to make a living as a poet, but even then, I can't give up. There's so many unanswered questions, so much to explore and wonder about. If I could just crack just one of life's secrets, I'll be satisfied. Well, travelers, is there any thoughts or ideas, or even questions you'd like to share with me? Don't be shy. I won't bite.
Hello there. Please pardon the mess. I'm not used to having company nowadays. Once I get things together, I'll tell you about myself, yes? That is why you're here. My name is Bram Stoker. I was born 1827 to my mother, Charlotte, and my father, Abraham, in Clontarf, Dublin. I was bedridden with a strange illness till the age of 7. 7 long years I spent in a bed, forcing whatever medicine the doctors gave my parents down my throat. Then, one day, through some strange miracle, I made a complete recovery. Can you believe that? The doctor said I wasn't supposed to live past 10 years old. And here I am now. After I overcame my illness, I grew stronger. I went to elementary in Dublin, in a Catholic school near my home. I went to college in Dublin too, Trinity College to be specific. There I was named University Athlete. I was still plagued by a sickness though, this one much more puzzling. After I graduated, I spent my time as a theatre critic, and one day my work caught the attention of Sir Henry Irving. He was one of the greatest actors to ever touch a stage, and such an amazing man. His intellect, his personality, his creativity, it was perfect. He even had his own theatre company, which he asked me to manage. One day, whilst on tour, in 1878, I met my wife, Florence, who then had my dear son Noel a year later. And yet I could not love her. In fact, I hated her. Day after day after day, my hatred for that woman grew more and more and more for the way she treated our son. She would beat him bloody if he were to step on a dress of hers. She'd constantly lock him out in the snow. She valued her appearance and her status more than our family, and that angered me to no end. Not only that, but there was no emotional attachment between us. Yes, we have a child. Yes, we are married, but it's empty. There's nothing there. I then realized that what plagued me wasn't an illness, but instead a curse. A curse that no priest or exorcist from any church could ever absolve me of. A curse that I would have to bear for the rest of my life. And it wasn't until I met Oscar Wilde that I found the answers I longed for, and a warning. A warning to be cautious with what you show to people. Oscar was cursed as I was, yes, but he was bold. I envied that until he became too bold. As a result, he's somewhere, but not here, whilst I am. One night, after a rather fine dinner I treated myself to, I had a chilling nightmare. Visions of bloodthirsty, evil creatures of the night that preyed upon the innocent. It was terrifying, but it was beautiful. This was different from any other nightmare I'd had. This spoke to me in a way that I had to act upon. The morning after, I grabbed my pen, I grabbed my papers, and I wrote. And I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote until there was nothing left. My rage, my fears, my desires, my woes, everything that I was went on those papers. Those papers got turned into a book. A book that was a personification of my curse. The creature I dubbed Dracula. With that out of the way, what questions do you have for me?
Oh Lord, I'm so tired. I just got done with a performance. It was one of my favorite songs, Natural Woman, and I performed it for the lovely Carole King. Most of y'all know who I am, but for those of you living under a rock, my name is Aretha Louise Franklin. Most of y'all also know me as the Queen of Soul, but I'm just little old Riri. That's what my family calls me. And we're closest family, so y'all might as well too. I'm not quite sure how you guys got back here in my dressing room, but since you're here, I might as well tell you a little bit more about me. I was born on March 25th in Memphis, Tennessee in 1942. But when I was 2, we moved to my true hometown, Detroit. Sadly, I spent my 10th birthday in church, mourning the death of my mother. But it was just around that time when I had started singing as a soloist in my daddy's church. Now, my daddy's church was a huge church. Activists, leaders, and celebrities visited almost every Sunday. Dr. Martin Luther King even came once, and I got to perform in front of him. Little did I know that I would end up singing at his funeral. When I was 14, my first gospel album was recorded, and I spent my summers in Chicago with the Mavis Staples family. And I traveled to California with my daddy and met the incredible Sam Cooke. My daddy was making sure that I was on the right track to become a very successful gospel singer. But I didn't want to be a gospel singer. I wanted to be a soul singer. And as you can imagine, my daddy wasn't too happy about that. When I turned 18, I told my daddy that I was moving to New York with Sam to pursue my career as a soul singer. And my daddy was so disappointed. But he still loved me, and he was still my manager. So he helped me get signed to Columbia Records. And there I produced my first single, Today I Sing the Blues. And that did numbers on the Hot Blues and Rhythms charts. You could say that my daddy got over his disappointment as soon as I started bringing those checks home. In January of '61, I released my first album from Columbia Records, Aretha Franklin with a Ray Bryant's combo. That album made it on the Billboard's 100. And after that came the electrifying Aretha Franklin and the tender, the moving, and the swinging Aretha Franklin. Then came the moment that I will never forget. The performance where I was crowned as the Queen of Soul. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was headlining at the Regal Theater in Chicago, and I wore the most beautiful silver dress. I sung Respect, Never Loved a Man the Way I Loved You, and Rock Steady. I personally felt that I did a phenomenal job singing. I felt as if I was singing with the power of the Holy Ghost. After my performance, the incredible radio sensation, Purvis Spann, announced that I would be crowned as the Queen of Soul. He placed a crown on my head and he said that I had a voice of soul. And then the whole crowd started chanting and cheering my name, and I got a standing ovation from everyone in the theater. I had finally made it as a soul singer, and I was only 25 years old. After that unforgettable night, my title as the Queen of the Soul just stuck. Now, a few months before, I sat listening to Respect by its original author, Otis Readings. And the lyrics just came to me. I began writing a new improvised version of the song. Little did I know that my revision of the song would become the civil rights anthem, the feminist anthem, and my signature song of the century. By the end of 1967, I had everyone singing R-E-S-P-C-T, find out what it means to me. Well, I have had a very long and prosperous career. I won 2 Grammys in 1968, a Grammy in 1970, 1971, and 1972. I won 2 more Grammys in 1973, a Grammy in 1974 and 75. I won another Grammy in 1980, 82, 84, 86, 88, 92, 94, 04, 06, and 08. Not to brag, but I won 18 Grammys of the 44 that I was nominated for. In 1980, I got to perform in front of the Queen of England. It was a great honor. But child, I was so nervous, let me tell you. I was in my dressing room choking down hors d'oeuvres and sweating bullets before I went out on that stage. In 2008, I performed at the Grammys, Never Gonna Break My Faith, and I received a Grammy for Best Gospel Performance. And how could I possibly forget? I performed in front of our very first black president, Mr. Barack Obama, at his inauguration in 2009. I never thought I would live to see the day where we would have a black president. I thought I'd be long gone by then. And the funny thing about that particular performance is that many people would not stop talking about my very stylish gray hat. Now, I always knew that I had very good fashion sense. But my hat remained the main topic of conversation for hot minutes. Now, I have had some health issues, but I'm certainly not complaining. I count every day that God gives me as a gift. I was a heavy smoker, and I did have some issues with alcohol abuse, but I have stopped smoking and drinking because my great voice is a gift that God gave me. One of my favorite meals was good macaroni and cheese with some crushed skins on top. Woo! You're talking about a good meal? But it was meals like that that contributed to my bad health, my cancer, diabetes, and my very many surgeries. Since then, I have recovered, and I feel a bit better. I am just so glad that the Lord saw me fit to live throughout all of those procedures. Tonight marks a new highlight in my chapter. I performed in front of our great president, Mr. Barack Obama, and his beautiful wife, Michelle Obama. And my friend Carol personally requested that I sing Natural Woman, since it was her favorite song. I got a standing ovation in the middle of my performance, too. Certainly not my first, but definitely more special due to the very special people in my audience. You must forgive me. I feel as if I've been talking forever. Are there any questions?
Hello, I wasn't expecting anyone, or maybe I was. I haven't left the house in weeks. The days may be blurring together. You're here to talk to me, Shirley Jackson, I suppose. Well, I grew up in the upper middle class, which was something my mother took great pride in. My mother had high expectations for our family, but especially for me, her only daughter. She wanted to look at me and see herself looking back, but what she saw instead was her greatest disappointment. My father and brother were easier to get along with, but I felt separated from them as well. Books were my only source of comfort as a child. As soon as I could read words, I knew I wanted to be a writer. My parents had not wanted me to be one, but once I was out of the house, they could do nothing to stop me. I attended the University of Rochester for a year, but I wasn't committed to my studies. I dropped out, or technically I was asked to leave, but that school had stunted my love for writing, and it made me take a year off before I moved on to Syracuse University. Published my first ever story in the campus's literary magazine. There, I also met my husband, Stanley Hyman, and we married as soon as we graduated. I was immediately drawn to him because he saw me differently than everyone else. He didn't care about the things that made me an outcast, that made others scared of me. He was interested in what I had to say and in what I wrote about. To a girl who had never felt special or worth anything at all, he was my savior. You know how that ends. Stanley is first and foremost a literary critic, but when he got the opportunity to be a professor at Bennington College in Vermont, he took it and we moved there. I wouldn't say I was happy to leave New York, but there was a weight on my shoulders that got lighter and lighter the farther away I was from my parents. Suffering is inevitable, but I suppose I believed my childhood was the worst thing I would face. Stanley doesn't like to concern himself much with the households. By the time we moved to Vermont, our first two children, Lawrence and Joanne, were already born. Lawrence wants to be a publisher now, the curse of having a writer and a critic as parents. Stanley's a good father, but he's not always a good husband. Still, I'm perfectly fine with taking care of our house and our children. I like having things to do. It quiets the thoughts, especially when I can't force myself out of the house and no new stories come to fruition. My third child, Sarah, is most like me. She's very passionate, especially about things most would deem mundane. She's born the same year I published my first ever book, The Road Through the Wall. That book was inspired by George Eliot.
Her writing is supposed to make one think about the complexity of humanity, something that's a theme in my own works. I want my readers to forever be affected by what I write, to see how we have the power and the will to be so many things, but often end up cruel. We're scared of how beautiful the world is, so we create things to hate. The most cruel thing I've faced is my own mind, but cruelty also walked the halls of our home. When Stanley started teaching at the college, he gained an interest in some of his students. He did not try to conceal his affairs from me. Still not sure how I feel about that. The details from that time in my life are hazy, but at some point I agreed to his terms. I believed in our marriage, and I believe in providing the best life for my children. My children, naturally, are the most important part of my own life. Ever since I was young, I have longed to be needed. Being a mother gave me that chance. When I thought I would die stuck in this room, they brought me out. My fourth and last child, Barry, was born when I published Heinzelman. Barry is named after my brother. Once we both grew older, we crossed the divide that had plagued us during our childhood. I'm happy that he's the uncle of my children. You know, the few people who know me, including my brother, would say that I tend to put myself into my characters, particularly Natalie from Heinzelman. I suppose when I was younger, I felt the same way she did about the world, the desire to leave it behind. Personally, I see myself in the main character of another book of mine, Haunting of Hill House. It was never my intention, but I write about and for the people who are under the oppression of their own minds. At our core, we must all feel this separateness from everyone else and the desire to understand why, yes? That is why my thoughts and my feelings are so infused in my characters. In a way, they're also my children. I've published 6 novels altogether, one very recently, I believe. Many short stories as well. I've also written comics and magazines and memoirs about my life as a mother. With all the writing about the inconceivable I do, it's good to ground myself in the truth. The most bewildering thing of all is what's real, what's right in front of us. Do forgive me, I've been talking for a while, haven't I? That's really not something that's usual for me. I should get back to my writing, but first, did you have any questions?
Last night you were dreaming and I heard you say,
Johnny.
when you know my name is Ray, that's what I believe.
Hey there, brothers and sisters. I really couldn't see you. Just rehearsing for my big performance. I'm so successful that if my mama could see me, she'd have a heart attack. It was only me, my mama, my father, and my little brother. We lived a simple life down in Florida. Mom was a sharecropper, and my dad was a mechanic. And my little brother, well, look, I know why y'all here. And you know I like to joke around a little. But after my brother's death, I was changed. He died drowning in the laundry tub, and I just watched. Stood there like a statue. He was struggling, but I just watched. I can remember my mama's face, screaming and sobbing as she carries my brother's dead body into our cabin. Sorry about that, y'all. Lost my thoughts. After my brother's death, I slowly started going blind. The whole world went dark by the time I was 7. See, the doctor said it was a glaucoma, but anyways, after that, my mama enrolled me in school for the deaf and blind, where I start playing the piano and some other instruments. But Pa died when I was 10 and Mom died 5 years later. At the age of 15, I was alone. I was forced to leave the school and the only thing I had left was music. So I decided to move down to Seattle and start performing with different musical groups and made my first ever song, Confession Blues, with the little Huffney Maxon trios. See, being blind and all, I was surprised to hear that my song was soaring like an airplane, right? Right into the second spot of the R&B Billboard chart. A great kickoff to my career. Over the years, I started to release more songs and make more hits that I'm pretty sure you know of, like Hit the Road, Jack, I Got a Woman, Unchain My Heart, George on My Mind, and a lot more. See, the song I love to play is George on My Mind, but the fans love to hear Hit the Road, Jack. During my career, I experimented with different styles of music and took some musical inspirations from my fellow brothers, Nat King Cole and Charles Brown. I won 5 Grammys, 5 Grammy Awards for a little blind boy from Florida. See, every time I step onto that stage, I can just tell that the audience is with me. But you know, my life ain't all that glorious. The last few years I've done things I'm not really proud of. I spent too much time at the bottom of the bottle and putting poison into my body. Both of my marriages ended only a few years later because of the choices that I've made. Mama, if you can hear me, I'm so sorry. I know you can be disappointing your little boy, but if there's one thing that you ever taught me, it's to never let your problems get away with your success. But enough about me. Y'all got any questions?
Thank you, 5. There.
Oh, hello. Are you just gonna stand there and watch me but not introduce yourself? Well, I guess you know who I am. I'm with you. Are you here for the game? Working? A fan? If so, all signings will be dealt with after the game. But forget about that, would you?
Well, thank you. Well, since you're here, what do you think of doing a motion to get the people going at the end of the anthem? Something like I'll just feel it in the moment. It is the national anthem at the Super Bowl. Have y'all seen The Bodyguard? It's not out yet. Forget I said anything. But it's with me and Kevin Costner. It's my acting debut. And he said he would not do that film with anyone but me. See now, my album just came out last November. I'm Your Baby Tonight just won me another 4 billboards. And of course, my sophomore album, Whitney, it won me how many awards now? 4 American Music Awards, my second Grammy, and Soul Train. See now, my debut album, Whitney Houston, ooh, it's got great tracks like How Will I Know and You Give Good Love, but everyone's favorite was always Say All My Love For You. Yes, I see you know your stuff. Thank you for enjoying my music. But my personal favorite from that album was always Hold Me with Teddy Pendergrass. Oh, dear, it takes me back to those days when I could just close my eyes and sing back in my home church, New Hope Baptist Church, in New Jersey. You see, that's where I'm from. And singing in front of that congregation of ladies has prepared me to go sing this damned anthem today. You want to know something funny? I was the first black woman to ever appear on the cover of 17 magazine. Isn't that something? That was in 81. It's 91 now. I was only 18. And then after that, thanks to my dear mother, Sissy Houston, I got signed with Arista Records. And between Mr. Clive Davis, the head of Arista, and my dear mother, they got me onto the Merv Griffin Show. See, now back then, the Merv Griffin Show was one of the most popular shows, and it brought me to something big. People knew me all of a sudden. And then I went on to work on my debut album for 2 years. See, now, I know my fans and y'all are worried about these things y'all keep hearing from these news outlets. They're just spewing nonsense. I would never want to leave this life or settle down. If anything, I wish I could be more exciting so that I could match what was happening to me out there. Connecting with thousands of people through music just from a stage. It's something truly magical. It's not something I'd ever think I'd stop. Ooh, y'all hear that? That sounds like a lot of people. I heard it's about 46,000. That makes about, give me a second, 173, no? 176,000 eyes and ears watching and listening to me. Ooh. Would thought those church ladies been preparing me for something as nerve-wracking as this, don't you think? How does that thing go again? You should know. It is the national anthem. Yes. Oh, say, can you see my early light? Oh, I've got it now. Okay. 146,000. Man. And who would have thought that me, Whitney Elizabeth Houston, would be the one to sing our country's song after an international crisis over something like oil? I never knew it was something that serious. But, well, it looks like I've got another minute or two. You got any questions?
Guten Morgen. Good morning. My name is Wilhelm Carl Grimm, and this is my dearest brother, Jacob. Jacob.
Hello, my name is Jacob Grimm. We are very pleased to have you in our office this morning.
Now, me and Jacob didn't know you all would be here this morning. This is quite a surprise. But since you all are here, and I'm quite a storyteller myself, let me tell you all about the Brothers Grimm. I was born February 28th, 1786, and my brother
January 4th, 1785. Our father Philip Grimm was a very successful jurist, but he passed when we were very young. Not knowing much, being little lads, we didn't understand why we had to move from our home and stay with our grandfather and aunt. Our grandfather was a very honorable man. We looked up to him after father passed.
After a while, me and Jacob grew tired of Stianu, left everything behind to pursue our dreams. But we were far from what we wanted to achieve. Yes. We then would move to Cassell, where we would attend Frederick's Gymnasium. We were at the top of our class. Nothing could stop us. We were getting our work done, and we were together as brothers. And then grandfather passed. Shouts at us, but of course we knew he would want us to go on and continue our journey to greatness. And because of that, we became the teacher's most beloved students.
I knew more about German history than most of our instructors.
And I could read and write like a gift from God. Naturally, we graduated from Frederick's Gymnasium, top of our class, exceeding expectations.
Shortly after graduating, William and I didn't hesitate to go straight to Marburg University.
Oh.
They call that place a school, but I have my doubts. William and I wanted to focus on our major of social studies, but we weren't nearly as wealthy as the other students. So we were pushed down to law. Naturally, this barely slowed us. We denied all of the rejections thrown our way because we knew we could create something great, something extraordinary. Then our mother passed. Mother, she was one of the greatest women I ever knew. Now it's just us, and everyone against us. It shouldn't matter if William and I are different from you people. We should be treated with respect. I'm sorry. After Mother passed, it was my task to take up the mantle as the man of the home. And after graduating from Marburg University, I began my duties as court librarian for His Majesty King Jerome, who ruled over all of Westphalia.
After hearing this, I didn't hesitate to join him. Living in Cassell, I would meet interesting people that would tell these fascinating stories about princesses, kings, and lizards. Hearing all of this, Jacob was excited to hear our tales as well. So interesting they were. Some people were happy to give us this information.
And some people obfuscated.
But these tales, I believe, are going to become something big. Bigger than life. Bigger than what me and Jacob could ever imagine. German folklore stories that teach people lessons about life. You see, we want to take these stories and turn them into a collection called Grimm's Fairy Tales.
Though they aren't technically our stories, as we are only recorders, oral historians, if you will.
But there's so much we can tell you about these tales and the amount of work and studies we put into these. How do I begin? Well,
you may have heard of Kinder and Hashmaikin. Have you heard of Snow White, Hansel and Gretel? It's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. It is important to remember that our tales are more than just stories. Some may dismiss our collection as fanciful imaginings and wondrous nonsense, but consider this query. What is the true meaning of goodness? What does good and bad mean to you? It is something we as human beings often trouble ourselves with. We hope our collection might help. William and I published our volume of Kinder and Hashmak in December of 1812. Currently, we are in the midst of revamping the original issue. Though these stories were originally meant for children, we know these tales, so sacred, so special, do more for morals than one might expect. The twisted and sometimes grim nature of our tales is but a reflection of how our real world demands survival. And in order to survive, we must have a strong set of morals and values to uphold.
And adults may read our tales and express such distaste for such a violent tale. But even the whitest-haired elder leans for further understanding of these tales. As my brother said, you are familiar with the story Snow White, yes? What might it teach you? Kindness over vanity, spite over goodwill. Well, for your sake, I do hope it's the former, as the latter will get you nowhere. That is why we write for adults. They'll understand, and soon one day they'll find a true moral of a story. Morals one day, we hope, can encourage future generations of Germans to live more generously.
You see, it is our goal to protect and preserve these stories as if they are sacred treasures found only in the pyramids of Giza, so that future generations may pick them up and derive meaning and moral from them. We collect these tales from all corners of Western Europe, from the French to the British. We collect them and iterate them into our books. So interesting the way the mind might interpret a tale. Violently, passively, it boggles the mind in many ways.
Now, with all of these tales, you might be wondering, what's our favorite? Well, mine is the one and only story of Cinderella.
Childish princess story, Cinderella.
It's not childish. It's the story of a young girl who keeps her faith in Christ, despite the wickedness of her stepmother and stepsisters. It also shows the result of karma that picks your fate of your disgusting actions. Also, who doesn't love the story of a princess finding her prince? Now, Jacob loves the story of the juniper tree. When I told him we shouldn't document it,
It teaches a valuable lesson. I enjoy the tale of the juniper tree. A tale where a mother gives birth to one beautiful baby boy, just as she wished. But soon after, she passes away under the juniper tree. Later on, the boy's father would remarry to a very foul woman. The boy's stepmother didn't like the boy very much. So sad. Anywho, the boy's stepmother kills the boy. She tricks him into poking his head into a chest and then, wow! She takes his head clean off. No one would know about this murder other than the stepmother. She would even cook the boy into a soup. A soup which the boy's very own father even consumed. It was so vile and so cruel.
Okay, Jacob. I understand you are excited to tell these people about their tales, but look at them. Seems they want to speak as well. This is a conversation after all, right?
My, you're right. We've been talking to you all an awful long time. I presume my brother would like to get back to work on our revisions. Do you have any questions for us before we return to work?
Any at all?